Welcome to the TTS Talking Educators podcast. Each week we'll be joined by educational experts from across the globe, offering exclusive insights, inspiration and guidance to help practitioners unlock the potential for learning in educational settings. Hi, my name's Dr. Shaddai Tembo, your host for this week's TTS Talking Educators podcast. I'm a senior lecturer at Bath Spa University, an associate lecturer at the Open University, and an independent speaker and consultant for critical early years. Throughout this series, we'll be discussing a range of topics aimed at supporting Oracy in primary and early years settings, inspiring you with guidance and resources to enhance your practice. Now, this week, I'm delighted to introduce Adam Marycz as our guest. Welcome to the podcast, Adam. How are you today?
Shaddai, I'm all right. Thank you. Are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks. Looking forward to getting into this conversation. Before we get started, perhaps you could just introduce yourself for our readers and listeners.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm Adam Marycz. I'm the Early Years Education Consultant at TTS. I've been here just over a year, and prior to that, I was an early years teacher and setting manager of nurseries and wraparound provision settings for well over a decade, supporting children from birth right through to 11 in different education and care environments, building those environments, working with families, helping to coach educators as well. And then I've been lucky enough to do some work outside of this space as well, with different conferences and events and some lecturing and that, just to really help. Professional development, I think, is really important, and have these critical conversations like we're a part of today. So I'm really pleased to be here.
Brilliant. And in this episode too, we're talking about Oracy again, but extending our thinking perhaps more to consider the factors that influence how some children are able to gain stronger Oracy skills than others. So I'm really interested to start off by asking you, what are those factors that influence children's Oracy skills, and what's happening in the background? Why aren't children all developing at the same age?
Well, I think there's such a broad question. I think there's so many different factors that go into that. I think, the first one and the main one that potentially always gets brought to the forefront is about whether they're disadvantaged or under-resourced, and the socioeconomic status of that, and the families that might not necessarily have that, those experiences themselves, that might not have that education level themselves, do potentially struggle to support the children to do that as well. We understand about how Early Years Pupil Premium works, and the fact that focuses primarily on economic status, and that focuses on providing settings with extra support, extra money, funding. Essentially, we saw the increase last month. I think it was like 550-60 quid a year increase in Early Years Pupil Premium that settings receive for children who meet the criteria for that, which is broadly along the free school meals line, and that's purely down to the finances and the economics. But it isn't just that. I think that's potentially why it can be really challenging to support children, because it's not just the financial income of their families that dictates the support that they get, or their developmental ability. Children obviously with SEND or with speech and language and communication needs potentially need that, but might not necessarily be eligible for any kind of additional support. So how, as educators, could we best support that? I think that's an important question to consider. And also there's the different factors that influence it. Like, if your English isn't your home language, for example, if you've got English as an additional language, then that will absolutely impact your communication language and your speaking and listening, and not just yours as a child, but also your families, and how can we as educators support everybody to do that? If families don't speak English as their home language, then what we've got as educators, then we've got a role to play there to make sure that we're supporting them as well, and help them to, feel belonging, feel included, and also access provision properly, and access support that they or their children may need.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess there's something there about making sure that we as educators are not promoting maybe a deficit narrative around Oracy and children's speaking language skills. There might be a perception when we're talking about Oracy that we want children to speak in one particular way with proper English. Is that the case?
No, it absolutely isn't the case. And I think that, again, like when we were talking in the previous episode about the definition of oracy and what that is, I think that's a huge challenge around that, is what does that look like? And what would success look like from an oracy point of view? And it absolutely isn't the fact that we want everybody to speak a particular way and we want everyone to speak with a particular accent or a particular dialect. That isn't what it's about. It's about effective communication, and I think that is the most important part of that, is understanding that it's about it being effective and it's about being meaningful. Children can have strong oracy skills in a language that is not English. That doesn't matter. Us as educators, need to be able to support that, need to be able to facilitate that, and help children and their families to still access the same opportunities as they would otherwise. And again, like we talk about the disadvantage gap, and we talk about that. The figures are stark. That the amount of words that children hear per hour are stark, but it isn't just down to economic status. And I think that is such an important thing for us to remember, that even though the funding and that is framed very much around that, that isn't the sole factor, and that isn't, it has an impact. The research suggests, it evidences that it has an impact, but it isn't the main driving figure behind it. There's so much there when you're thinking about equity and you're thinking about providing everybody with those same opportunities. There are so many different intersections that cross. The idea of the intersections being the crossroad, and all the different parts of your identity all meet in the middle to form you. That there's so many different intersections that all build to create your opportunities and to create your ability to access resources, to access education, to access services. It isn't just purely down to that. And I think that's why, when we're talking about support, we're thinking about, as educators, how can we best support them? It always comes down to, well, you've got Early Years Pupil Premium to help close that gap, but that doesn't solve everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I think from what I'm hearing is that you're getting at a lot of culture and the cultural capital that children bring to the nursery settings, and the cultural capital that families hold, which is different, of course, based on the cultures that they're coming from. So the task for educators is how to support and strengthen and really support children's cultural capital, to make sure that they are having the same access to resources where possible, and we're not treating their particular culture as deficit or negative in any way, but really valuing their strengths.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about understanding, like I say, it's about understanding the capital that families come with, themselves, that the children's parents have got, and how can we support them. I think, when we think about this, we often get caught up in thinking about, right, how can we support the children? But it's got to be that holistic approach. We've got to support everybody. We've got to be able to support the families as well as the children. And what we can do as practitioners to help close that gap is to, identify the children who need that additional support. And we can then, provide that, whether it's one-to-one, whatever that looks like, provide those high quality interactions and those high quality learning opportunities for those children to help, like I say, provide them with that cultural capital, provide them with that opportunity, provide them with as many chances to talk and as many chances to be part of interactions as possible. I think, it's about supporting parents as well. It's about helping them to understand the importance of interactions, and the importance of the language that they use, the vocabulary, that they use with their children, and the context behind that as well. We think, again, like there's no manual for parents, is there? They don't get given that when a child is born. And I think about the lack of support that is out there for families, as much as there's a lack of support for children, and at times there's a lack of support for us as educators. So it's that making sure that we can help to support everybody to do that. And cultural capital has become a huge part of early years in recent years, but providing children with those opportunities to thrive and to understand the community in which they live. But that works the other way, in the way that it's about helping children to understand the communities that they come from, and embracing the communities that they come from. And like I say, that embracing that home language, you see sadly lots of settings where it's a real struggle, because potentially because there's a lack of support out there for them to help children to communicate in their home language, to help children to understand to understand what's going on in the provision around them, because they don't have that ability to articulate in English. They don't have that ability to use their oracy skills in English. So how, as educators, can we support that? And it's about, there is a lack of support, isn't there? I think that's the challenge. If you've got a high proportion of children who speak multiple different, who come from multiple different communities and speak multiple different languages, it's no mean feat being able to support them and ensure that they can access the provision in the same way, and that you as educators can communicate with them and their families in the same way as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm reflecting on the role of resources here. There's one argument that says resources are really important, and we absolutely need to have them to support young children. I guess there's another argument that says that it's worth investing in the practitioners themselves and their knowledge and understanding. So I'm wondering what your take is on that, and what we can do around resources for individual staff knowledge, but also in terms of the material, physical products that we have.
I think it's absolutely that balance. It's like, a lot of things always come down to there's no right or wrong way. There's always that middle ground, and your environment and the resources that you've got within them and the intent and the purpose behind them is absolutely crucial. But they're only going to have an impact if you've got effective, confident, knowledgeable educators who are able to utilise them properly and who are able to use them to really have an impact, and who really understand the purpose and the why behind them. There's some amazing resources out there to help you support children's language, and that can help them within the setting and at home. Think about some, the recordable, recordable different types of products. Just thinking here, there's recordable pegs, there's recordable talking points, there's big buttons, all of those kind of things. You've got big interactive recordable mats. Like they're brilliant to help children to communicate, to understand vocabulary, to understand new words, to learn new language. But they're only going to be effective if they're used properly. So it's that, I think you've got to invest in both. You've got to invest in the high quality play spaces, like high quality environments that are really, full of opportunities for talk, like we spoke about in the last episode, provided those lots of opportunities for interaction and for children to learn vocabulary and for children to understand the context of the words that they're using. But then educators have got to be provided with that opportunity to understand the why and the purpose behind that, and what is the desired impact of it. We think about intent, implementation and impact all the time, but I think for me it's just that broader question of why. All you need to ask all the time is right, why are you doing, why have you got that resource here? Why are you having that interaction now? Why are you introducing that vocabulary now? And again, it's not about adding pressure to that situation. It's just about that simple getting that fundamental understanding of, well, if you understand that why, then you're going to have an impact because there is an intent behind what you're doing, and every resource and every product has got an intent. There is a reason behind its being. There is a reason that it's going to be implemented. There is a reason it's going to be used, and that the impact that they can have is significant. Think about so many opportunities and so many things over the years of children who have really struggled to understand vocabulary, have struggled to communicate, have struggled to speak. And I think, a huge one that I think about is actually how we speak, so how we orally pronounce words and our pronunciation. You can say word, you can speak, and how you hear yourself is very different to how others hear you. And that's where the recordable resources are have such a big impact, because a child can record themselves on that, play it back, and it will sound completely different to how it sounds in their own head. And having that ability to listen to yourself back, I think I'm sure you do it when you listen to, podcasts and that you've done. You listen to yourself back, you're like, I can't say that word. Didn't know I couldn't say that word, but now I realise I can't. And that's something that you can work on, and that you can support that in the future. But equally, you as educators, if you are, helping children to understand new vocabulary, you're helping children to understand stories, you're trying to support children to with English as an additional language, you're helping children to translate, then those resources again, are so impactful for that. You can engage families with that. You can help to support families to understand what you're supporting the children with. If they're learning about a particular topic, then you can provide that opportunity for parents to really engage with that, because those kind of resources that are provide that two-way recording are just really impactful.
Yeah, that's excellent. I never listen to myself back on podcasts because I hate sound my own voice. But nonetheless, you raise a good point around speaking for young children and then being able to attune to their own language and reflect on what they're saying. So that's absolutely important. I think also what you were saying there about it being that relationship between using material resources with intent is really fundamental to supporting Oracy in the setting, but also in terms of those partnerships with parents. There's some really good strategies that you began to draw out there, and I'm sure we'll talk more about in the next episode. So that's a great place to end it. Thanks so much, Adam.
Thank you very much.
I'd like to say a huge thank you to our guest Adam for joining us and providing such valuable insights. You've been listening to the TTS Talking Educators podcast with me, Dr. Shaddai Tembo, and Adam Marycz. If you've been inspired by our conversation today, don't forget you can sign up via the link in our episode notes to be the first to hear about future episodes and access exclusive follow-up content, including ideas for your setting and links to relevant resources.